One crisp autumn morning as Emma sipped her coffee, she noticed a letter tucked under her front door. It bore the HOA's official seal, a sight that always brought a sinking feeling. Opening it, her heart dropped. Dear Miss Carter, after a recent inspection, it has come to our attention that your roof does not meet community standards. You are required to replace it within 30 days or face a fine of $50,000. The letter ended with a list of approved contractors and a stern warning about non-compliance. Emma reread it, disbelief turning into frustration. Her roof, though a little weathered, was far from needing replacement. The $50,000 fine was more than she earned in a year. What on earth is this? She muttered, clutching the letter. She stepped outside, glancing up at her roof. It was the same as it had always been, solid, reliable. Emma decided to call the HOA president, Mr. Daniels, known for his strict demeanor. The conversation was short and curt. Miss Carter, we have standards to uphold, he said. Your roof is an eyesore. Either replace it or pay the fine. The choice is yours. Emma felt anger boiling inside her. How could they impose such a ridiculous demand? And why now? Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a battle that would uncover secrets far darker than a leaky roof. Emma stood in her living room, staring at the HOA's demand letter that had taken over her thoughts. The $50,000 fine loomed like a dark cloud over her small world. She didn't know where to begin. Her salary as a teacher barely covered her mortgage, utilities, and the needs of her two children, Liam and Sophie. The idea of replacing the roof, something she didn't believe even needed replacing, felt like an impossible mountain to climb. Her first step was to call one of the approved contractors listed in the letter. The man on the other end of the line, while polite, quoted a jaw-dropping amount for the roof replacement, $38,000. Emma nearly dropped the phone. She tried calling other contractors, hoping to find someone cheaper, but they either didn't return her calls or quoted similarly outrageous prices. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table with a notebook and calculator, trying to figure out her options. She considered taking out a loan, but her credit was already stretched thin. Selling her car was another option, but that would make commuting to work nearly impossible. The next day, Emma decided to visit Sarah Martinez, her neighbor and close friend. Sarah greeted her with a warm smile but immediately noticed Emma's tense expression. What's wrong? Sarah asked, setting down her coffee mug. Emma handed her the letter. Sarah read it, her expression shifting from curiosity to anger. Are you kidding me? They're doing this to you too? Sarah exclaimed. Emma's eyes widened. What do you mean? Sarah pulled out a similar letter from her kitchen drawer. It wasn't about a roof but her mailbox, which the HOA claimed was outdated and needed to be replaced with a specific model costing over $500. She had been fined $1,000 for non-compliance. This is getting out of hand, Sarah said. They're targeting everyone for the smallest things. And these approved contractors. Something about this feels wrong. The two women decided to talk to other neighbors to see if they were experiencing similar issues. Over the next week, Emma and Sarah knocked on doors and listened to stories that echoed their own. A retired couple down the street had been fined for their fence, which the HOA claimed was not the right shade of brown. A young family had been ordered to replace their driveway, despite it being in perfect condition. The pattern was clear. The HOA was issuing baseless demands and pushing residents toward specific contractors. The more Emma learned, the angrier she became. One evening, while discussing their findings, Sarah mentioned an elderly neighbor named Tom Riley. He's lived here for decades, Sarah said. If anyone knows what's going on, it's him. Emma and Sarah visited Tom the next day. The retired builder welcomed them into his home, which was filled with framed photos and memorabilia from his long life. When they explained their situation, Tom sighed deeply. This isn't the HOA I remember, he said. When I moved here, the HOA was fair. They focused on keeping the neighborhood safe and clean, not on bleeding people dry. Everything changed when Mr. Daniels became president. Now it's all about money. Tom went on to explain that he had noticed questionable behavior from the HOA board, including sudden changes to community rules and financial reports that didn't add up. "You're not the first to question them," Tom said. "But most people give up. They're too scared of the fines or the legal threats." Emma felt a mix of frustration and determination. She knew she couldn't fight this battle alone. "What should we do?" she asked. Tom hesitated, then said, "You'll need to dig deeper. Find out where the money's going and who's benefiting. But be careful. They don't like people asking questions." Emma and Sarah took Tom's advice to heart. They began researching the HOA's financial records, which were publicly available but difficult to decipher. They noticed large sums of money being funneled into vague categories like maintenance and improvements, but there was little transparency about how the funds were actually being used. One day while reviewing the records, Sarah noticed something odd. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a line item. "Payments to a contractor named Premier Roofing Solutions? It's the same company on your letter." Emma felt a chill. "You think they're working together?" "It's starting to look that way," Sarah said. They decided to dig deeper into Premier Roofing Solutions and discovered that the company had been awarded multiple contracts by the HOA over the past year. What's more, the company's owner had ties to Mr. Daniels. Photos of the two men together surfaced on social media. The more Emma uncovered, the clearer it became that the HOA was exploiting residents for personal gain. But knowing the truth was one thing, proving it was another. Emma reached out to Linda Pearson, a young lawyer who had recently moved to Willow Creek. Linda had already heard whispers about the HOA's behavior and agreed to help. Together, they began compiling evidence of financial mismanagement and conflicts of interest. As they worked, the HOA's tactics grew more aggressive. Emma received another letter, this time threatening legal action if she didn't comply with the roof replacement. Other residents reported similar threats. Despite the mounting pressure, Emma refused to back down. She knew she was fighting not just for herself but for her entire community. Emma and her allies decided to take their findings to the community. They organized a meeting at the local library, inviting all residents to attend. The turnout was larger than expected, with many neighbors eager to share their own stories of harassment and unfair fines. As Emma presented the evidence she had gathered, the room buzzed with outrage. People began to realize they weren't alone and that their HOA was exploiting them. The group decided to take collective action, filing a formal complaint against the HOA and demanding an independent audit. The HOA board, led by Mr. Daniels, responded with intimidation. Emma received anonymous letters warning her to stop, and Sarah's car was vandalized. But these tactics only strengthened their resolve. Linda filed a lawsuit on behalf of the residents, accusing the HOA of fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of power. The case gained media attention, and a local journalist published an exposé on the HOA's practices. The legal battle was intense, with the HOA's lawyers trying to dismiss the case. But Emma and her team had gathered enough evidence to keep it moving forward. The turning point came when a former HOA board member agreed to testify, revealing how Mr. Daniels had manipulated the system for personal gain. The court ruled in favor of Emma and the residents. The HOA board was disbanded, and Mr. Daniels faced criminal charges for embezzlement. An independent committee was formed to oversee the neighborhood's affairs, ensuring transparency and fairness. The victory was bittersweet for Emma. The fight had taken a toll on her, but it had also brought the community closer together. Neighbors who had once been strangers now stood united, determined to rebuild their neighborhood on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. As Emma sat on her porch watching her children play in the yard, she felt a deep sense of pride. She had stood up to injustice and won. And while her roof remained the same, her home had never felt more secure.